She was only 21 when the telegram came. Your husband, Sergeant Daniel Reeves, declared missing in action. The words felt like a gunshot inside her chest. They told her the war had taken him, but no one mentioned what it would leave behind. Her name was Evelyn Hart, a war bride in the spring of 1944. The church bells had rung for her wedding just 6 weeks earlier. Her dress was borrowed, her bouquet paper, and her groom gone before the petals fell. Now she stood alone in a rented room near Portsmouth, staring at a uniform folded on a chair, still smelling of him. Smoke, metal, and sea. Every night she wrote him a letter, and every morning she hid it inside her wedding dress, folded beneath the lining where no one would look. My dearest Daniel, they say I should move on. But how does one move when half of them is gone? I wear your ring when I sleep. It burns against my skin like guilt. She sealed the envelope with trembling hands, though there was no address to send it to. The war had taken even that away. By summer, the raids had begun again. Sirens howled through the night. Evelyn would run to the shelter clutching her dress, not because it was silk, but because it held her only proof of love. Neighbors whispered that she'd gone mad. She sleeps with her wedding gown, they said. She talks to ghosts. They didn't know that sometimes the ghosts answered. One night, while the city shook under bombardment, she heard a faint knock at her door. 3 knocks, then silence. She opened it and found a man standing in the hallway, drenched, trembling, his uniform torn, but not English. His helmet bore the Iron Cross, a German pilot. He was wounded, bleeding through his flight jacket. He looked at her as though she were the last person left in the world. For a moment, the sirens disappeared. There was only the sound of rain and their breath. Please, he said, his accent broken. No police. I only need somewhere to rest. Evelyn froze. The rules were clear. Aiding the enemy was treason. But the blood dripping onto her floor was too human to ignore. She helped him inside. He collapsed by the fireplace. She tore strips from her bedsheet, pressed them to his wound, and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he answered weakly, "but neither should you." For a second, she almost smiled. He told her his name. Erich Weiss, Luftwaffe pilot, 23. Shot down over the channel, separated. From his crew, he'd walked for days, hiding, until the bombing forced him to knock on her door. She should have turned him in, she knew it. But something about his voice, the weariness, the quiet apology behind every word, felt too close to Daniel's last letter. As the night deepened, Evelyn sat across from him, watching the flames flicker. Her heart pounded with fear, and something else she didn't want to name. Outside, the world burned. Inside, a silence bloomed. When he noticed her staring, he whispered, "Do you hate me?" She didn't answer, because she didn't know. Later, as he slept, she reached for her wedding dress, the one thing she'd kept pure, and wrapped it around the bundle of hidden letters, placing it beneath the floorboards. If anyone came looking for him, she wanted no trace of what she was about to do. She watched the firelight play across his face, the same way it had once danced across Daniel's. For the first time since the telegram, she felt alive and terrified. She leaned closer, whispering words meant for another man. "I don't know why you're here, but please, don't die tonight." He stirred, eyes opening just enough to see her fear, her pity, her warmth. "I won't," he said softly. "Not if you stay." She froze, her breath catching between guilt and desire. Outside, another bomb fell. The house shuddered, and in that trembling silence between thunder and death, the war bride crossed a line she could never uncross. The morning came slow, painted in gray ash and silence. Evelyn woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of rain dripping through the broken roof. The German pilot, Erich, was still there, asleep beside the hearth, his face calm for the first time. For one brief, terrifying moment, she thought he looked beautiful. Then the guilt hit her like a slap. She stood, pulled her coat tighter, and whispered, "When you can walk, you have to go." He opened one eye, the faintest, smile playing on his lips. "I know," he said, "but you didn't let me die. That's already treason." She wanted to hate him for that. Instead, she found herself laughing, a sound she hadn't made since before the telegram. For 2 days he stayed hidden in her small cottage. She told the neighbors he was her cousin from the countryside, too ill to travel. No one questioned her. Everyone had their own secrets now. Every night they spoke in whispers, fragments of language, half English, half German. She learned he played violin before the war. He learned her husband wrote letters that never arrived. "Sometimes," Eric said, "I think God gave us radios so he could listen to our lies." "And letters," she replied softly, "so we could pretend someone still cared." Their laughter felt wrong, like sunlight in a graveyard. Yet neither could stop. On the third night, he found the wedding dress. It hung behind the door, untouched since the bombing. He lifted the hem and felt the weight of paper stitched inside. "Letters?" he asked. Evelyn froze. Her hands trembled. "They're mine." He nodded. "I won't read them." But curiosity flickered in his eyes. And something else. Not lust exactly. Something hungrier, lonelier. That night she dreamed she saw Daniel and Eric standing side by side, one fading into the other, until she couldn't tell who was real. When she woke, her hands were shaking. The fourth day, she decided he had to leave. She packed him a loaf of bread, a flask of water, and pointed toward the woods. He thanked her, bowing his head like a guilty priest. Then he took her hand. "Evelyn," he said, "if I live, may I write to you?" Her heart stopped. No one had said her name that gently in years. "You can't," she whispered. "It's death for both of us." He smiled. "Then I'll write to God and hope he delivers." He stepped out into the fog, his figure swallowed by the rain. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, shaking. She thought she'd feel relief. Instead, she felt like the world had ended all over again. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, a knock. 3 short taps, like the first time. Her heart raced. When she opened the door, no one was there. Just a small envelope resting on the step. Inside, a letter written in precise English. "Dear Mrs. Reeves, I reached the coast, alive. You once said letters are for pretending someone still cares. Then let me pretend. E." Evelyn pressed the page to her lips, tears cutting through the soot on her face. She hid it under her dress with the others. From that night on, more letters came, always unsigned, always left in the same spot, and always written with words she wasn't supposed to need anymore. "When I close my eyes, I see the color of your hands. The bombs sound softer when I imagine they're your heartbeat." She should have burned them. Instead, she sewed them into the lining of her gown, the same place she kept Daniel's. Now, the dead and the enemy shared the same fabric against her skin. One morning, as she stitched another letter, a neighbor appeared at her door. "Post for you," the woman said, handing her a telegram. Evelyn's hands trembled as she read, "Sergeant Daniel Reeves, confirmed prisoner of war, alive." She nearly dropped it. Her world split in two. Her husband lived, and so did the man she wasn't supposed to love. The wedding dress suddenly felt heavier than lead. That night, she stared at herself in the mirror. 1 woman, 2 men, 1,000 sins. Outside, the wind howled through the chimney like a confession. She whispered to her reflection, "What if love can't tell the difference between right and wrong anymore?" And somewhere beyond the fog, a soldier and a prisoner on opposite sides of the same war. Both dreamed of the same woman in white. The news of Daniel's survival spread through the village like sunlight, warm for everyone except her. Women came to congratulate her, pressing her hand, saying, "You're blessed, Evelyn. God returned him to you." She smiled. She lied. And every night when no one saw, she unfolded Eric's letters and read them by candlelight. "You once said that silence is safer than love. I disagree. Silence kills slower." Each word felt like a heartbeat she wasn't allowed to have. And when she touched the ink with her fingertips, she realized she didn't know whose name her tears belonged to anymore. She passed. No more letters came. She told herself it was for the best. Then, one afternoon, a knock again. 3 taps. Hesitant, uneven. When she opened the door, a uniformed officer stood there. English. "Mrs. Reeves?" "Yes." He handed her a letter stamped with the crest of the War Office. "Sergeant Daniel Reeves, liberated, returning to England within the month." Her heart stumbled. She looked past the officer, and down the road, at the very edge of the woods. She saw a man watching from the shadows. Tall, still, familiar. When she blinked, he was gone. That night, she pulled her wedding dress from its hiding place and began unpicking the stitches one by one. Letters fell like feathers, German, English, both inked in longing. She laid them across the bed in 2 rows, one for each man. The candlelight trembled over their words. And then she noticed something she'd never seen before. The handwriting in Daniel's last pre-war letter and Eric's first were almost identical. The same curve of the E, the same way of crossing the T. Her hands shook. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." She compared them again. The ink was different, one brown, one black. But the pattern was the same. Could Eric have read Daniel's letters somehow? Copied them? Or worse? She pressed her palms to her face. Her heart pounded with dread and betrayal. "Who are you, Eric?" she whispered. "What did you take from him?" The candle guttered out. The next morning, she received another envelope, this time slipped under the door. No return, no signature, no seal. Inside, a single sentence written in German. "He is coming home. I will not." Her knees gave way. The paper fell from her hands. She ran outside into the fog, calling his name. But the woods only echoed with silence. A week later, Daniel returned. Thin, pale, eyes hollowed by years in captivity. When he saw her, he smiled faintly. "You look the same," he said. "Just older in your eyes." She kissed him, but it felt wrong, too careful, too cold. That night, as he slept, she noticed a scar on his shoulder. The same scar Eric had, the wound she'd cleaned that first night. She stared at it for a long time. When he woke, he found her watching. "What?" he asked softly. "Your scar," she whispered. "From when?" He looked away. "A plane crash. They bombed our convoy." She wanted to believe him. She couldn't. Over the following days, Daniel grew distant. He flinched when she mentioned Germany. He burned his old letters without explanation. And one night, she caught him sitting by the fire, holding a photograph she didn't recognize. It was of her, but taken secretly from the doorway of her cottage. She snatched it from his hands. "Where did you get this?" He didn't answer. "Daniel?" His voice broke the silence. "You said you'd wait." Her blood ran cold. "I did," she whispered. He stared at her for a long time, then said quietly, "Then why do I know his name?" She froze. "Whose name?" He leaned forward, his eyes dark, unreadable. "Eric." The room spun. She stepped back, shaking. "I don't know what you mean." But he cut her off. "He told me," Daniel said. "In the camp. He told me everything before he died." Evelyn's breath caught. What did he say?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "That he met my wife, that she loved him, that she kept his letters inside the same dress she wore for me. Her heart shattered. Tears blurred her vision. "Daniel, please." He stood, voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. "I spent 2 years in a cell, dreaming of you, and all along you were writing to him." She fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't mean..." But he was already gone, the door slamming behind him. Evelyn collapsed by the fire, clutching the old letters to her chest. For the first time, she didn't know which man she was mourning, the one who lied to her, or the one who told her the truth too late. As the dawn broke, she realized something awful. If Eric had truly been in the same camp as Daniel, then maybe the letters she'd received after his supposed death weren't written by him at all. They might have been written by the man she thought she'd buried, the one now sleeping in her bed. For 3 days, the house stayed silent. Daniel barely spoke. He took long walks through the woods, never saying where he went. At night, Evelyn sat by the fire, pretending to sew while he pretended to read. The air between them felt mined. One wrong word and everything would explode. She wanted to confess, but every version of the truth felt like betrayal. How could she explain that her guilt had become her only form of prayer? Then, on the 4th night, he came home later than usual. Soaked, pale, his boots covered in mud. She asked where he'd been. He said, "Paying my respects." "To whom?" she asked. He didn't answer. He walked past her, into their room, and shut the door. When she went in later, he was asleep, a letter open beside him. She recognized the handwriting immediately, Eric's, but the words weren't in German. They were hers, her letters. Every one she'd written during the war, recopied by hand. Her breath caught. Daniel had found them, the ones she'd sewn into the lining of her dress. He'd read them all. On the last page, Eric had written something at the bottom, words she'd never seen before. "Tell her I never lied. Not about who I was, not about what I felt. Tell her I tried to die as her husband, not her enemy." Her pulse quickened. Tell her I tried to die as her husband. But Daniel had never shown this to her. She turned toward him, shaking. "What is this?" He opened his eyes slowly, already awake. His voice was calm, too calm. "It's what he wrote before he died. I kept it, to remind myself of what you chose. Daniel, please." "I read every word you wrote to him." She swallowed hard. "Then you know I thought you were dead." He nodded. "Yes. But you didn't bury me. You replaced me." She stepped closer. "I didn't love him because he was German, Daniel. I loved him because he was you, the part of you I'd lost." His face twisted, torn between fury and heartbreak. "Do you hear yourself? You fell in love with my ghost wearing another man's face." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was lonely. I was dying. I thought the war would never end." He stood, his chair scraping the floor. "Then maybe it never should have." That night, Evelyn dreamt of the crash again, the plane falling, fire curling across the sea. 2 men inside, both calling her name. When she woke, she didn't know which one had survived. The next morning, Daniel was gone. The bed cold, the fire out. Only a note on the table, scrawled in his rough hand. "You wanted a ghost, Evelyn, so I'll be one." She ran outside, the fog thick, the forest swallowing sound. Near the edge of the clearing, something white fluttered among the trees. A scrap of fabric, her wedding dress. It hung from a low branch, torn open. The lining ripped, the letters scattered through the mud. She fell to her knees, gathering them, her hands shaking. Some were soaked, some burned, but one, near the roots, was dry, folded, untouched. The handwriting was neither hers nor Eric's. It was Daniel's. "Evelyn, he didn't die in the camp. I did. The man who came home is what's left of both of us. I saw him in the mirror this morning, and, for the first time, I understood what it means to be at war with yourself. If you still have those letters..." Burn them. End it for both of us. Her vision blurred. Daniel, she whispered. She clutched the letter to her chest, trembling. He had gone somewhere beyond forgiveness, a place neither of them could reach. Days passed with no sign of him, no footprints, no word, no body. The neighbors said he must have run off, that she should be grateful. But at night, when the wind howled, through the broken chimney, she heard boots on the floorboards. Sometimes the faint click of a lighter. And once, the smell of smoke and gunpowder. She would whisper into the dark, Daniel? Silence. Then, faintly, through the static hum of her old radio, a voice. Evelyn! She froze. Burn them. The radio went dead. She stood there in the silence, clutching the last letter, realizing the truth. She hadn't been hearing ghosts at all. Just echoes of men who'd both died loving the same woman, and the woman who had become their war. The house had grown quieter with each passing day. The walls no longer creaked. The wind no longer spoke his name. Even the radio had gone silent, a gray box of ghosts that refused to answer. Evelyn sat at the table surrounded by letters that refused to burn. She had tried. God knew she had. But every time the flame touched the paper, it died. As if the words were made of ash already. Burn them. End it for both of us. His voice still echoed in her mind, but she couldn't obey. To destroy those letters would be to destroy the only proof that love, even forbidden, had ever existed. She folded them neatly back into the dress. The once white fabric was now gray, the silk stiff with smoke and salt. It smelled of him, of both of them. She whispered, You can't burn what's already gone. Outside, a storm began to build over Portsmouth. Rain beat the windows like fists. Thunder rolled like bombs from another lifetime. Evelyn moved through the house slowly, collecting remnants. Daniel's pipe, Eric's glove, the photograph she could never explain. She placed them all inside an old wooden trunk. Then, she dressed herself in the gown one last time. The fabric clung to her skin, heavy with ghosts. In the mirror, she looked like a bride made of smoke. Maybe this is how war ends, she murmured. Not with peace, but with memory. She opened the trunk and laid the dress inside, covering it with the letters. Then she closed the lid, tight, and for the first time in years, she locked something away without promising to return for it. Decades passed. The house changed hands. The trunk was forgotten, buried under years of dust and furniture. Until 1978, when a young couple bought the property and began restoring it. In the attic, they found the trunk. Inside, the faded gown, the burned edges of paper, a bundle of letters tied with red thread. The writing alternated between English and German. Some were love letters, others confessions, and one, written in a shaking hand, unsigned, dated May 8, 1945, VE Day. To whoever finds this, love is the only war that never ends. We fought it under two flags, and we both lost. But if you read this, maybe someone finally won, just by remembering. The letter was framed in a local museum under a small brass plaque. The War Bride's Letters, 1944-45, author unknown. Found hidden in a wedding dress. No one ever discovered who Evelyn was. Her name didn't appear in any registry. Her grave, if it existed, was unmarked. But locals whispered that sometimes, during storms, the old radio in the exhibit would crackle to life, and a woman's voice would whisper softly through the static, Daniel, Eric, the fire's out now. For a moment, the air would grow colder, the lights would flicker, and then, faintly, a final sound, the rustle of silk, like a wedding dress moving in the dark. And then, silence. Forever.